Good morning. Today we're going to look at the Eighth Amendment, but first, kind of wrap up the Sixth Amendment from last week. Um, I will have a reading assignment dealing with Gideon versus Wainwright from last week's discussion on your right to a lawyer, speedy trial, to have it in the place where the crime was committed, to have witnesses in your favor, to be able to cross examine witnesses. All those things are the Sixth Amendment. So in Google Classroom today, there will be a reading on the Sixth Amendment court case, Gideon versus Rainwright out of Florida. And you need to read that, answer the questions, the quiz questions, and then a short essay on what you get out of the reading. All right, so that was Sixth Amendment. Now, the Seventh Amendment is if you have a lawsuit against another person for $20 or more, then you can have a trial court system figure that out in a jury. But because of inflation, $20 is nothing really. So the equivalent today would be $1,000 or more. If it's less than that, then it would be small claims court. But if it's $1,000 or more, you could have a trial and a jury decide in the favor between two defendants. And I guess you could have the option, if both parties agree, to have just a judge figure that out. So today's question is on Amendment 8. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. And this is all based on English rights. The Magna Carta from 1215 is the first case where the king's powers are limited by another entity, being the lords, knights, and religious orders, compelling King John to sign the Magna Carta and limiting some of his abilities to arrest and harass the nobles and religious persons of England at his whim. So that was an ongoing fight in England, but we then having our issues with the king and parliament and the military in the United States, some people being detained, no charges against them, troops in your homes. A lot of these things in the Constitution are coming from the events of the Revolution. So, at some point in England, different scenarios where people are being detained and put in jail and not told their charges or not brought to trial or not released on bail. So the English have put in place, first with the Magna Carta, then in writs of habeas corpus, an English Bill of Rights in 1688, that were setting on paper the rights that people have in England. So we then, being an English colony and then our own independent nation, following the principles of the Magna Carta and habeas corpus, court judicial systems, and the English Bill of Rights, then putting these rights into our own Constitution. So we want to have quick and speedy trial. If you're not a danger to the public, you will be allowed to pay bail and be released. Sometimes if crimes are too heinous, the judge will set the bail at $1 million or whatever, which is excessive, but uh, you don't want a murderer to get out and run away if the bail is $1,000 or something minor. But if someone puts up $1 million and or a bank or bondsman um, presents that to the court and potentially can use it, then maybe they'll uh, participate in keeping an eye on the person until their trial. So we generally have a set procedures for uh, fines, and when you are charged with something, you basically have 3 days to have a decide whether or not the person will be detained beyond the 3 days and officially charged, charges presented to the person, and then you can start the process of going to a grand jury, presenting the evidence, preparing for trial. Um, uh, those things are quite uniform in the United States. The last part of the Eighth Amendment: no cruel or unusual punishments be inflicted. Issue there is that in the United States, in our Constitution, it says that the death penalty does exist, and it talks about it in the Constitution that no one shall forfeit their life unless you have two people that uh, affirm that the crime took place, and it talks about treason, needing two people to convict someone of treason, not just one person against one person, and for them to then lose their life. So in the Constitution, it talks about that you can lose your life. So obviously, that means that the founding fathers uh, knew about capital punishment and the death penalty, and they're actually saying if you commit treason against the United States, you could end up forfeiting your life. So it's hard for a judge a couple hundred years later to say, well, it's cruel and unusual and shouldn't be in the Constitution. Well, you base your decisions on constitutionality based on the Constitution, and in the Constitution, it talks about forfeiting your life for treason. But most people do not lose their lives because of treason, and the death penalty is usually for murder. All right. So some states have had a, uh capital crime death penalty for rape and murder, usually. Supreme Court has determined that rape is not enough of a crime to forfeit your life. So at some point, over time, we deem that it has to be murder. And then we have some court cases coming out of Georgia. Georgia versus Furman and Georgia versus Gregg. In these two court cases, the first one, Furman, um, he's saying that he's running out of the home because the owner was awakened, and in that process, he trips and falls. The gun goes off and kills the homeowner. Then that's to say that's not like on purpose. So to give him the death penalty for accidental murder would be cruel and unusual, and it's debatable whether he's actually shooting at the person or it's an accident when he trips. So, but in either way, did he plan on murdering that person that night when this happened? Most likely not. So the Supreme Court ruled that the way that murder cases and the death penalty are shelled out and distributed out in the United States, totally unfair, and usually was given out to minorities at a higher rate than whites. So at that moment, there was a moratorium on the death penalty in the United States. And everybody's sentences were then commuted to life in prison. It was a 5-4 decision, and then the uh, the judges were not uniform on their reason for saying that the death penalty should be outlawed. Two justices were like, it shouldn't be done, period. But the other three were like, the way it is dealt out is unfair and capricious against minorities. So after that is handed down, that decision, many states then take the advice of the three Supreme Court justices and their problems that they see with handing out the death penalty. So they went back and changed their rules so that it would be more fair. And one of the things they did was to have a separate trial portion where you're found guilty based on evidence, and then is determined that, okay, this court case murder trial now fits the criteria to then be considered for the death penalty. So then you move to a second stage on death penalty phase of the trial. So then you're presenting evidence to motive, reasoning, rationale. Is this appropriate for this person to receive the death penalty, and witnesses, character witnesses for the person. And you can bring out that this person has done so much good and just a wonderful person until this one thing happened. Or you could have many people coming forward to say this person has always been a problem, has always been bad, has always been evil, and has probably committed other murders, and um, uh, the rationale that they might have family members come forward. And sometimes in this phase, if a family member comes forward, like the wife of the person where shot and murdered accidentally, or even in a grievous way, that a family member comes forward and says, I really don't want this person to be executed, uh, that holds a lot of water with a court. And a lot of times they will not be given the death penalty because the family not wanting that. And one of the reasons for the death penalty is that it's appropriate to the crime, murder, life for life, or if that's what some people believe. And then also that it's a deterrent against crimes, the crime of murder, to know that if you kill somebody, you could receive the death penalty. Some people would say that, well, that leads to somebody was going to kidnap somebody, and now they're afraid they get caught, then they'll kill a person to hide the crime and think that they won't get caught. So, or causes them to overreact, and someone could end up losing their life. So there's a lot of justice, the scales of justice up and down, and what people believe are reasons or not reasons to have the death penalty. So if you want to look at these cases more thoroughly, Georgia versus Furman is the case where the Supreme Court saying there's something wrong with the death penalty the way it is. And then also Georgia versus Gregg, where then, because of the changes that took place in the state, in other states as well, uh, to make it more fair and balanced of how the death penalty is given out, that it is then constitutional again. So when I was in middle school, 77, someone was executed by a firing squad, Gary Gilmore. He chose to have firing squad his choice and was shot by a firing squad in 77. And since then, the states have been allowed to use the death penalty. Wisconsin is not a state that has the death penalty, so we don't have to worry about these issues. But it is a national issue uh, currently and probably forever until um, either people don't commit murders anymore or states do not have the death penalty as an option for the crime of murder in their states. So look on Google Classroom, and on Thursday we'll be talking about states' governments and states' rights in their federal system. Be good. Stay healthy.